Welcome, artists all over the world. It's my great, great pleasure to introduce you today, the amazing George Pransky. And I know he's not very familiar in the art world yet, but there's a reason why I asked this guy. I could share everything about him that I know, but I'm just going to link to his website, and I would highly, highly recommend that you check it out. He wrote a book called The Relationship Handbook, which is an impeccable book on relationships. It's by far the best book I've read on the subject. And the reason why I asked him to come talk on this subject is because every artist has a relationship with their work. And I figured if you guys can see clearer the nature of your feeling regarding your work, there might be an opportunity for you guys to thrive more and to be less bothered by feelings that you might not understand. And so that's it. Welcome, George.
Oh, I'm glad to do this. Looking forward to it.
All right. So I have a couple of questions from fellow artists, and a general focus, and that is, as I said already, for artists, how to handle difficulties, but more interestingly, how to thrive more, artists have a very keen sense of feeling. Mm-hmm. They live that. They live and die by expressing that, but it's often misunderstood outside of their work. And so this is going to be revolving around state of mind, as this podcast is dedicated to. And so let's just jump in. Like, the one thing that I remember as I learned about art forms is someone said the notion, to stay inspired is a job in itself. And I accepted that for truth. It's like, yeah, you need to go to musea, you need to go out there, and you need to find inspiration. And I want to give you as much of the floor as I can. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think that every field, every profession, every field is self-selected in a way. You know, there's something that draws a person to that field. Like in athletics, people are drawn by competitiveness. Now, it's been my experience, and logically speaking, that artists are drawn by the inspiration that they see in the world. In other words, they get touched by the world, they get touched by what they see, and they're drawn to that because they're drawn to expressing it. So I think that people who are drawn to being artists are way more easily touched and easily inspired by life than the general population, self-selected. So you ask yourself, well, if that's true, then how could artists possibly suffer from a lack of inspiration? Well, it's very simple. Inspiration, as you'll notice in young kids, is our natural state. It's our default. It's our default state as a human being. In technical terms, they call it the homeostasis. It's like room temperature. Yeah. Okay. Now, the only way that people lose that is that the thoughts and feelings that they have, let's say, create like an eclipse. They interfere, contaminate that feeling. You see, so if you have that inspiration, and it's like having a clear windshield to see life and be inspired by life. And the mind is clear. And then as you put thoughts in there, the thoughts cloud your view. And in doing so, reduce your inspiration. Now, the thoughts that people have, for the most part, are just personal thoughts about who I am and how am I doing. Is my art going to sell? And there's fears, and then there's expectations built up in people's heads, and the past failures get on their minds, and other people's opinions get on their minds. So we as human beings, it's easy for us to think about all these different things about ourselves personally. And we do that at the expense of our level of inspiration. You see? Now, I doubt if there's anybody watching this, listening to this, that isn't saying, that happens to me. I get worried about this and that, or upset about this or that, or jealous about this or that. So the question is, how are some people able to stay out of their personal thinking and personal feelings better than others? Okay, and I would suggest that it's their understanding of how our internal experience is created that allows us to see how we can keep our minds free and not get swallowed up in our own thinking. And it's all boils down to the fact that people think, and that when they think, every thought they have is brought to the senses by what you might call, we call consciousness. So people become conscious of their thinking, and it becomes their reality at that moment. It becomes their perceptual field at that moment. It becomes what they feel at that moment. And if you step back from life and look closely, you'll see that people's thinking, which is continuous, changes, however slightly, at every moment. And with it, the experience of that thought changes as well. So, for example, if I'm sitting here and I'm an artist and I'm thinking, well, I wonder whether what I'm painting here is going to sell. And then I have the thought, well, it's a very competitive marketplace. It's an awful lot of artists who are very good who aren't selling things. Well, that thought, if you notice, my spirits will get lower. So the feeling that comes with that thought is going to bring my spirits down. Okay? And the lower your spirits, the lower your level of inspiration. It kind of obscures your natural inspiration. Now, if that person could understand that all that was happening is they had that one thought, and that thought was brought to life as if it were true. So that one thought made it look like they really did have a problem selling their stuff. They really would. If you can see that as just what you're thinking in that moment, and that's the only reason why life looks different to you and why you feel different, then people are able to let that thought come and go uneventfully. Because thoughts are by nature transitory. They are only held in place by our belief in them, our commitment to them. So if we put energy into them and believe in them, they're held in place because we're telling ourselves that they're important. Okay? And naturally, they be held in place. Now, If, on the other hand, they don't take on a reality, and we don't tend to put a lot of attention into them, they have no roots. They just will come and go uneventfully. Now, everybody has that experience of thoughts just coming and going uneventfully because they don't have any relevance or importance to the person. Like, the best example I can think of is if you're in a movie or something and you suddenly think, oh, gee, when I get home, I got to do this or that. You know, what am I thinking about that for? I want to enjoy this movie. And it just goes on its own. Mm. Okay? So there's so many thoughts we have during the day that we just don't pay attention to, don't care about, and we don't put energy into them, and they come and go. And then there are some that we get frightened by, or we think are important, or we, blow reality into them. And those stick in our mind, and they obscure our view of the beauty in life. See, so it's a very simple understanding, but it is something you do have to understand. And that's, I guess, really what I make my living doing, is showing people an understanding of the nature of our psychological existence, where our experience comes from, where our feelings come from, and that understanding alone is enough to make a person more resilient and get back into the moment quicker than if they didn't have that understanding.
So it sounds like, as you're describing it, thoughts are almost like flies buzzing around your head.
Yeah.
And you can either be bothered by them or understand they're just flies. Because they're not they're not really flies, so they even go away by themselves.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And a lot of people have the misperception that thought, you have to replace thoughts. You don't. We naturally have a healthy, responsive flow of thought.
Yeah.
Okay? And that, a lot of those thoughts are inspirations particularly to an artist. They see beauty, they're responsive to life, okay? And then you override that by taking your thinking seriously, and in doing so, holding it in place. That's a natural thing that you're doing. You see, the natural thing is to be in the moment, smell the roses, feel connected to people, other people, have inspirational ideas. That's what's natural. And then we innocently override that by getting serious about our thinking and getting frightened by it and getting distracted by it.
So the funny thing is that this is so broad. It's very simple, but this is describing all of human experience.
Yes.
And because we've been exploring this in previous sessions, but the thing is, it's so broad that it's almost it's like the reason why I thought it's like understanding this, everybody who's going to listen to it is like, yeah, I get this, and then they move on. They might move on, right?
That's right.
But the depth of it is so, I would call it the depth, which is a metaphor, of course, but the depth of it is so deep that you don't notice, like you might not notice in all the areas that it plays out. So what I did is I asked my fellow artists, like, what bothers you? Mm-hmm. Like, or what would you like to improve? What would you like to struggle with? And it's going to be this, I figure it's going to be the same story, but from a very fresh perspective, because you'll be, well, I don't know what you're going to say, but So I figured let's just grab a question, like a little bit of a more concrete example where somebody's might not see how this plays out in their life. So this one is really cute. It's a good friend of mine who said, "How do I get off my candy addiction as an artist? Like I eat a lot of candy and it's addictive to me. How do I get rid of it?" As an example.
Okay. Well, the problem with all addictions is that the urges that you have are just thoughts, okay? But when those thoughts are brought to life, they look like they're more than thoughts. They look like they're needs. You see, so we get tricked by the fact that thoughts come in the disguise of consciousness. They come in a disguise that makes them look real and makes them look solid and makes them look independent of the fact that you thought them. It's kind of like a hologram. I'm sure all artists are familiar with those, where you put up a hologram that looks exactly like the person or the building that it represents. It's exactly like it. And to the senses, it looks like it's really there, okay? But we all understand that a hologram, even though it looks real, is not real. And in fact, if you shut the light out, the hologram would disappear. And the same thing is true of urges. If I have an urge to eat candy, the only thing that'll help me is my understanding that the sensory data from that urge is made up. It's illusory. It's made up. It's like the hologram or like a mirage. It looks like it exists, that urge is real, that it's important. If you can see that it only appears that way, and it isn't that way. It's not the nature of thought to be real. It isn't. It's just thought. So it's the ability to see beyond the appearance of urges that helps people get out from under their addictions. Now you can use myself as an example. I had a really hard time losing weight, and unbeknownst to me, it was partly because I had a real sweet tooth, and I would have all kinds of urges and all kinds of desires to eat starch and sugars. And at one point, fortunately, I really felt in my heart, gee, I really would like to get down to a good weight and stay there, you know. I'm tired of going up and down and all this. So I had this kind of internal resolve. It wasn't willpower. It was something I was really ready to do. And I began to see urges as very temporary. And the only reason they didn't seem temporary is because I bought into them. So I would get a strong urge to eat a candy bar. And I began to see that urge had no life of its own, that it would just come and go. And so all of a sudden, my urges got smaller because they weren't fed by my attention and my, the truth I was breathing into them. And when the urges got smaller, it was a lot easier to lose weight. So literally, my weight, my weight and my urges got simultaneously smaller. So as my urges got smaller, my body got smaller.
That's wonderful.
And my urges got bigger, my body got bigger. But I didn't understand. I thought that the urges had a life of their own, that they were some independent force that would enter my psyche. And I didn't realize that the size of an urge is 100% how much weight, validity, and truth you put in them, how much you believe in them, how much you respect them. They grow with respect. So they're this size, they're 2 inches in diameter. And then as you believe in them more, they become 4, and then they become 8. And your physical weight will conform to the size of your urges. And the size of your urges is just a matter of understanding. If you understand the nature of urges as just thought, and you understand that feeding them energy and feeding them validity makes them grow bigger, it's your senses are fooling you. They're playing tricks on you. That's the nature of thought. It feeds into the senses via consciousness, and it makes things appear different than they really are. So as it creates a nice spiral, in other words, you lose respect for the urges aren't as powerful, and then because they're not as powerful, it's easier to ignore them. And then once you start ignoring them, you see that they really weren't what they appeared to be. They look like these really scary things, and they're not. And it just takes on a life of its own.
Would you? Would you say that in your case, feeling, this might be wrong, this is interesting, would you say in your case that as you felt better, you were less inclined to follow the negative feeling when it came to candy? It's like as you experienced more mental well-being, you were less inclined to try and solve it because you're already feeling good?
Well, I wouldn't say it that way. I would say that as I felt better, as my well-being level went up and I felt more peace and quiet and fulfillment in life, thought looked more like thought. It made it, if I had a negative thought, let's say I had a fearful thought or an urge or something like that, that thought would look like thought because it would be in contrast to how I felt. And I'd say, oh wow, I'm having an urge right now. And that kind of created a distance for me. And it was easier for me to look that in the eye and not get intimidated. I remember at one point when I started losing weight, I kind of looked forward to a really strong urge to see how I would do with it, And that changed things. I mean, that's a very aggressive approach, and I never got the strong urges that I was hoping I would have.
Because you wanted to try it out, to see how... Yeah.
But the same mind that wanted to try it out was the same mind that was coming up with the urges.
Yeah.
You see, so naturally it all fed back in, and then all of a sudden I just didn't have the urges.
So, I'm wondering what I'm going to ask next, because it's going to be a question of similar nature, but not entirely.
It's all right. No, I'll answer it differently.
Cool. So, another good friend of mine asks, she explains that she's currently working 6 days a week at a very fulfilling job, Like she's working in the big leagues. She's very much enjoying it. She likes the challenge of it and having a great time. Logistically, she's like making sure she's getting enough sleep. She's a very smart girl, and she's doing her workouts, eating well, and all of that.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I would say so. And not surprisingly, she's doing very well. And then she asks, like, how do I stay sane with all this crunch time, with like she's working 6 days a week, full out, at the top of her level. And then she asks, like, how do I stay sane during this? How do I not lose it? And she describes pressure and all of that.
Well, the pressure that human beings feel is self-imposed in that it's generated within their thoughts and felt through their feelings as pressure. So I'll give you a simple example. People will make up a to-do list for the day. Okay, and they have 10 things on their to-do list. Now, the pressure that they feel is not going to come from the thing they're doing right now, necessarily. It's coming from them thinking about the second, third, fourth, and fifth thing, and how little time they have, and how important all these things are, and why am I getting this thing done faster? So it's kind of what do they call it in the movies? It's a narrative, maybe. It's kind of like a narrative about what they're doing, what their fears are, what their concerns are. Now that's where the pressure, 100% of the pressure is there. It's not in what they're actually doing. Like I had a secretary, or I guess receptionist is a more politically correct term, a receptionist at a company who was felt so much pressure that she was on, anti-anxiety pills, and she was having to cut her hours down. So we sat down, and I said to her, Gloria, explain to me where the pressure comes from. I said, let's say that you just did your job. You just, typed out what needed to be typed out. You answered the phone. You did the best at answering the phone. You took your lunch, then you came back again. Now tell me where the pressure is in that. And it's very profound. She says, well, George, the pressure isn't in that. The pressure is in the other things. I said, well, what else is it in your job? I mean, you're a receptionist, right? You answer the phone, you type stuff up, and you deliver. What else is there? She says, well, there's, what the boss is going to think about the message that I gave him, and it's wondering whether I'm typing fast enough, and worried about how I'm going to get my shopping done before I come home to the kids. And she just listed up a laundry list of worries and concerns that she would say had absolutely nothing to do with typing or answering the phone. Okay, so in a way you could say it is gratuitous thoughts that she's having, extraneous thoughts that she's having. And every one of these thoughts has an emotional impact. A feeling comes with it. So when she thinks, oh, how am I going to get my shopping done before I get home? There's a fearful thought that accompanies that. And it feels like a pressure. Yeah, I'm under pressure. I'm under time pressure. Well, she's under time pressure because she's entertained the idea of time pressure. And consciousness is indiscriminate. It'll bring every thought to life. And it brings that thought to life. So she had more thoughts, extraneous thoughts, during her day than she did have thoughts about what she was actually doing. And she was kind of humbled by that. And she said, oh my word, I didn't realize that I was so distracted. And that was enough to change things. all of a sudden, she didn't respect those extraneous thoughts, and they started to get smaller and go away. I saw her 2 months later when I was working in that same company, and she said, "I can't imagine why I didn't love my job. It's so thoughtless, so reflective. It frees my mind, and it's just wonderful. I can do it automatically, really, and it's just a great job."
It sounds almost as you were asking about where's the pressure coming from. Like it's not the phone, it's not the typing. As she was describing it, she was describing holograms. It's like so she.
That's it. Yeah, it's just as a joke. I said to her, "Well, does your typewriter create pressure?" She says, "No, it doesn't." What about the telephone? Is that putting pressure? She says, "No, all you do is just answer it." It was so clear that there was no pressure inherent in what she was doing.
Now, someone might want to follow this down all the way to the tiniest details. Someone might say like, "Oh, but what I'm doing is different. In this case, I'm struggling with this, and then this, and then this, and then." Because you can start an argument that way, right? Somebody can come up with.
Let's go to the extremes. Okay, I worked in a surgeon's organization. So they were a business of surgeons, and they would all, rent themselves out to hospitals and stuff. All right. So I'm talking to the surgeons, and one of the surgeons said, "Well, George, easy for you to say that there's no pressure, but I've got life or death on my surgical table. And in addition to that, I have the insurance companies breathing down my throat and attorneys dying to do malpractices. Now, how can you say that's not pressure?" Okay? Well, one of the other surgeons got up and said, if you can't handle a patient dying from your negligence, then you're in the wrong business. So the guy that asked the question got offended by that. He said, "Well, don't you care?" And he said, "No, I do care. But I know that self-imposed pressure makes me a worse surgeon. And I understand that I could think about the risks and what could happen and all that. But every thought I had in that direction would take away from me attending to my operation that I'm doing. And if I did it on my own time, it would make even less sense." Because you get athletes who, shooting a foul shot in the last second of the game, and some of them feel no pressure whatsoever. It's zero. And I'll tell you, the ones that make it to the pros do better keeping pressured thoughts out of their heads than the ones that didn't make it to the pros. I mean, they're self-selected. And there's no situation in life where a clear mind without distraction and pressure isn't going to outperform a distracted mind.
That's wonderful. And I remember, I'm not sure where you said this, but I heard you say this in an interview, and you said something about like the best way to enjoy life or to go about life is to just be here and do the thing and live the now, right. And as you're talking, it kind of sounds like the thoughts that are considered pressure holograms. They're flies. They're distracting, but they're also innocent. They're made of nothing.
Yeah, they are innocent, and you're always going to have thoughts coming through your mind that are extraneous and irrelevant. And with understanding, you can let them come and go uneventfully to a greater degree. So throughout my day, I have all kinds of thoughts that have nothing to do with the moment. They're not responsive to my life in that moment. And over time, I've gotten greater able to see them for what they are, and then they just come and go. They have no power on their own. Like even while I'm interviewing you, I'm having thoughts about whether I could have said what I just said better. Is this going to speak well to the audience and all that? And it isn't. It's just worry. It's not like it's helping me to do a better job. It's worry, and it's a distraction.
But the difference is, you know that the distraction is made of nothing. It's hologram.
Yeah.
You still experience. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. It's like a mirage. Now, sometimes I don't see that as clearly, and it takes a presence in my head, and that does distract me from what I'm up to. But that's common. I mean, that's going to happen to everybody.
So in a video, you also said you have to take accountability for your own experience. Meaning, it's your, like, could you speak to that? Would you? This was a video on stress that I really enjoyed, but.
Well, this is a particularly important in relationships. Particularly important relationships, that if you can take responsibility for how you feel in a given moment, and your relationships will be great. And if you don't take responsibility for them, and say you're a couple, and instead of taking accountability and saying, I'm the one, I feel this way because of what I'm thinking. That's the only reason I feel this way, is because of what I'm thinking. That's taking accountability. That's taking responsibility. Now, when people don't do that, they blame the way they feel on their circumstances and on their mate and on the other person in the relationship. And then there's a debate about whether the person really should have said or done what they said or did, and it goes downhill from there. So like with my wife and myself, she gets discouraged sometimes about how messy I am. Okay? And she gets discouraged, and at some point she feels bad about me and feels bad. Okay? Now, the question is she going to see that as happening in her head, or is she going to see that as me making her feel that way? Now, my wife Linda and I both know that no one can get into your head and make you feel a certain way. It doesn't work that way. The feelings we have are self-generated. So she might say, well, I want you to pick up your socks or keep your desk clean. She might say that, but she wouldn't say, you're making me unhappy or you're making me discouraged or whatever because of how messy you are, because we both know that that's not the case. It's not the nature of the human experience. Well, that accountability for our experience really helps us, because once you become accountable, you will see it change. And once you start looking outside and blaming the world for your experiences, you'll see it getting worse. You'll see that when that same circumstance comes up again, it's doubly hard for you to face it. But if you take accountability, you're working with where the real source of it is, and you have a learning curve, and you get better and better at thinking about it. So my wife Linda is way better at dealing with my messiness now than she was a year ago. It doesn't bother her as much. She gets over what bother she has quicker. And I also have improved because rather than, reacting to her criticisms and blaming her, I understand that the feeling bad about myself is internally generated. And I've had a learning curve on that. So I'm keeping my mind clearer, and it allows me to be neater.
It sounds almost like there's a distinction between your experience of something, right? Something might be good or bad, feel good or bad. And then there's the logistics of it. There's like, how do you go about solving it?
Yes, exactly. Exactly, and that's exactly right. It's two different things. And my wife and I usually won't deal with the logistics of the problem until we're over our reaction to that problem. So if she's discouraged or down about me and my messiness, she won't come to me and talk to me about it. But she knows that she's not going to really herself because she's upset. There's a chance that I'll react badly to her attitude being bad. So we separate the two.
Could you repeat the last part? And I'm going to turn on my video because I don't think the connection can stand the current data, at least on my end. I think. So I'll edit it out. Could you say that again about the logistics and how you and your wife deal with that?
When my wife and I have something that looks problematic to us, like my messiness, or something else, a disagreement we have about the kids or whatever, we know that when we're in the grips of it, when we're stuck in our thinking about it, and we feel kind of stuck and maybe don't feel good about each other and we feel upset, we know that we're not going to think very well under those circumstances. So knowing the transient nature of thought, we'll just get over our thinking, get back into a good place, feel warmly towards each other, and then we're really good at discussing the situation, and it'll look much different to us from a good place than it did from a bad place. Much more hopeful, many more possibilities. So that's a really good understanding in relationships, is that when you're caught up in the heat of the moment, you're not going to see it the same. You're not going to be able to think about it as well as when you get over it and you're back. Like, if you step back from it, you realize that, Western civilization, as we know it, is not dependent on this situation being existing. If it's messiness or if it's problem with the kids, the future of Western civilization does not can survive that particular situation. And that gives you a little perspective. And then the thoughts move out a little bit and give you some room to see possibilities.
So this is very, it's like, I find this, for me, this was incredibly helpful, and I just want to rephrase that. So you're basically saying that an artist, I'll just give an example, an artist might sit down, they might get to work, They might struggle with something, a logistical issue, and they might perceive that as a problem, right? Oh, my work is not any good in this moment. I'm not getting it. Right? This happens very frequently, or that might happen. Now, with that experience, there's a feeling that is quite negative, and that helps you to remind you that you're not seeing it as clearly as you could be. And then you do the best you can, but
you're not going to be. The feeling tells you that your understanding level isn't very good. That your thinking is working against you. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, you can do your best with that, but if you can get over yourself and get over the feeling that you have, you'll have a much better platform to deal with the situation.
And would you recommend that people try to get over it in the moment, or would you just understand that it's here, you're experiencing it, but it's made of nothing, and there might be an opportunity when you feel better to look at it again?
Well, I think that intending to get over it and seeing the possibility that you could get over it is enough. In other words, if you see, it's just my thinking. Thinking is transient by nature. I'm just experiencing the results of my thinking. I'll get over that for sure. I always have. It's the nature of life. Nothing lasts forever. So if you intend to get over it, if you say, I think it'd be a good thing if I got over it, feeling badly, being upset. And I think it's very realistic because, it's just thought. It's transient. I've gotten over so many things in my lifetime up to now. No reason why this thing shouldn't. This is not going to be a permanent, feeling. The intent and seeing the possibility is all you need. The rest of it will take care of itself. Now, I don't know whether it'll take you 5 minutes or 20 minutes, or I don't know what it'll take necessarily. But just wanting to change your mind and knowing that you are capable of doing it is enough for people to be very resilient and get over things.
I recognize that, and I've a very, very short story that ties into this, and it ties into the girl who's working crunch time. And I think you'll recognize it's a very, well, I'll just say it. Like, at one point I was climbing and I was noticing I was afraid of heights. I was experiencing fear, and I wasn't able to shake the fear, right? And so I did the best I can in the moment, and I knew I was secure, and I just moved very slowly through the obstacle course in this experience of terror with sweaty hands and knowing that on some level I was safe. And by the time I got at the end of the climb, I had been so my body had been so tensed up and struggling that I just got tired. But I knew at the end that the feeling was getting less because I was looking around and I saw a little girl and she was climbing, she was having a wonderful time, and that reminded me I know this isn't real, but I'm not going to be able to shake it. It's just here right now. Yeah. But at the end of it, I took accountability for my experience because I knew I'm safe. There's no way I'm going to be falling. Mm-hmm. I'm not currently able, even though I would like to, shake this feeling. I know that being tired is caused by my body just tensing up. And knowing that, I was excited about the next day because I knew I'm probably going to see this a little clearer, and I'm going to be less, my body's going to be able to move a little more fluid, and I'll be less tired because I'm less struggling with it. And the potential exists for me to have a wonderful time and not, I can climb all day.
Well, that's a great example, Henk, because it's an example of someone who's in the middle of a feeling, okay? Understands it for what it is, and as a result of that, is able to perform and think as if that feeling wasn't there. So it's like what happened is the feeling kind of went into the background because you understood it for what it was.
Right.
That's a very powerful story for people. So even in the heat of the moment, if you understand that it's the heat of the moment, that's enough to protect you. And you will see all the upset and all the feelings get weaker, get more in the background. And in their place will come this clarity of being able to see get new thought that will help you out.
Yeah. So we've been discussing how to handle difficulties quite well. The thing that over time, as I started to see this a little deeper, I got less interested in the difficulties. I got more interested in like what's possible, and this started to excite me because it's like if you get a glimpse of the potential that lies here, is that you can go out and do things, have an experience, and as you're less struggling with the difficulties, you're going to be more open to what you just said, new thought.
Mm-hmm.
And new thought brings with it new ideas, new understanding, and this has the potential to push the art form forward immensely.
Well, that's what art is all about: is new thought, is imagination, is being inspired by and touched by the beauty of life. I mean, artists are on the growing edge of that ability, that creative ability of making something from nothing. I mean, this is like their stock and trade. That's why people are willing to be artists for very, very low income, you might say, because they thrive on that creative experience. And that creative experience is available to everybody and is always there when your mind is, to the extent that your mind is free, you will get new thought. The freer your mind is, the more new thought you get. And the inspiration of having new thought is why people are willing to go into the arts, even though it's very competitive and it's very difficult to make a living. They just love that feeling.
That's actually quite powerful because you're basically pointing to the fact that most artists are going to be very aware of their ability to experience new thought, right?
Absolutely. They would resonate with that. When they hear this, they'll say, oh yeah, new thought. I get that all the time. They might call it the creative process or insight, but it's all the same thing. It's just when you're out of the way, new thought is what takes its place.
And so basically this is almost, well, I wouldn't call it a formula, but you could call it a metaphor for it.
Yeah.
It's like you could have more new thought the more you get out of your own way. The deeper that you see this, the more you're going to be open to seeing new.
And the artists are kind of in the same position as that secretary I was talking about, because if you talk to an artist about the stresses in their life, which I have done, none of it will have to do with the creative process, the art that they do. It's all about their worries about this and what about that, and how come this guy's doing that, and how am I going to pay my bills? And it's all extraneous thought. That's 100% of the stress they have is just extraneous thought. The actual art is pure joy to them. Well, listen, Henk, I gotta go now because I have another appointment. I hope that's okay.
Of course. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope people get a lot out of it. I'll contact with your associates on what to share and what to link. And I'll send you a link to the interview. It's been wonderful, George.
Oh, well, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate doing it, and I appreciate you talking to my office, and because that'd be way over my